Hello friends. Today we will do our English full practice so that if you can have Sky Improv of your English speaking, then let's start. The scarlet quill of Salem. The salty air of Salem, Massachusetts, clung to Alara Vance like a second skin, carrying whispers of the sea and echoes of a past she desperately tried to outrun. It was the autumn of 1793, and the scent of turning leaves mingled with the perpetual tang of fish from the bustling wharves, a constant reminder of the world's relentless march forward, even as Alara felt herself anchored to a different time. Her fingers, calloused from years of stitching and mending, traced the worn spine of a leather-bound journal, its pages filled with elegant script, a stark contrast to the rough fabric of her daily life. This journal was her clandestine confidant, her only true solace in a town that still eyed outsiders with a cautious, sometimes hostile, gaze. Alara had arrived in Salem 3 years prior, a refugee from whispers and accusations that had followed her from a quieter, more agrarian part of the state. She'd found work as a seamstress for Mrs. Albright, a kindly but stern woman who ran a respectable shop near the town square. It was honest work, steady, and it kept her hands busy, preventing her mind from wandering too far into the shadows of memory. Yet, every evening, after the last customer had left and the oil lamps cast long, dancing shadows on the walls, Alara would retrieve her journal. Its contents were a dangerous secret, a narrative woven from threads of betrayal and unspoken desires, detailing a love that had blossomed in the most unlikely of circumstances, only to be crushed under the weight of societal judgment. Tonight, however, a different kind of tremor ran through Salem. News had arrived of a ship, the Sea Serpent, returning from a perilous voyage to the Far East, laden with exotic spices, silks, and rumors of a passenger of considerable means. The wharves buzzed with anticipation, and even Mrs. Albright, usually impervious to the town's fleeting excitements, had commented on the stir. Alara, however, paid little mind. Her world was small, confined largely to the needle and thread, and the ghosts that haunted her quiet moments. But destiny, as it often does, had a way of weaving itself into the most mundane of days. The very next morning, a carriage, far grander than any Salem usually saw, pulled up to Mrs. Albright's shop. Its dark, polished wood gleamed, and the horses, sleek and well-fed, snorted impatiently. From within, a man emerged, tall and broad-shouldered, with an air of quiet authority that silenced the usual street chatter. He was dressed in finely tailored clothes, a stark contrast to the homespun attire of most Salem residents, and his dark hair, brushed back from a high forehead, caught the morning sun. "Good morning, madam," he said, his voice a low timbre that held a subtle, cultivated accent Alara couldn't quite place. He addressed Mrs. Albright, who had rushed to the door, a mix of deference and surprise on her face. "I am Elias Thorne. I understand you are the most skilled seamstress in Salem." Mrs. Albright, flustered but pleased, curtsied deeply. "Indeed, Mr. Thorn. How may we be of service?" Elias Thorn's gaze swept the small shop, lingering for a fraction longer on Alara, who was bent over a half-finished dress, her head bowed. There was a directness in his eyes, a depth that seemed to penetrate beyond the surface. Alara felt an inexplicable shiver, a prickle of awareness she hadn't experienced in years. It was as if he saw something in her, something she meticulously kept hidden. "I require a comprehensive wardrobe," he stated, his voice calm and precise. "For myself, and for my sister, who will be joining me shortly. Something suitable for a gentleman and lady of discerning tastes." He paused, then added, "And I prefer swiftness and discretion." Mrs. Albright puffed out her chest. "You've come to the right place, sir. My girls are the finest, and Alara here." She gestured towards Alara, who reluctantly straightened up, her heart a sudden drum against her ribs. "She has a true gift with fabric." Alara met Elias Thorn's eyes for a fleeting moment. They were a startling shade of green, like deep moss in a shadowed forest, and held an intensity that both unnerved and captivated her. He offered a slight, almost imperceptible nod in her direction, a silent acknowledgement that left her feeling strangely exposed. Over the next few weeks, Elias Thorn became a regular fixture in Mrs. Albright's shop. He was precise in his instructions, demanding in his expectations, yet always polite. Alara found herself increasingly assigned to his commissions. He'd arrive with bolts of fine English wool and exquisite French silks, his presence filling the small workroom with an unspoken tension. He was a man of few words, but his observations were sharp, his compliments, when they came, rare but meaningful. One afternoon, while Alara was measuring him for a waistcoat, her fingers brushed against his arm. A jolt, like static electricity, passed between them. He didn't flinch, but his gaze, when it met hers in the mirror, was suddenly unreadable, yet undeniably intense. Alara's cheeks flushed, a warmth spreading through her that had nothing to do with the proximity of the fireplace. "You have a steady hand, Miss Vance," he murmured, his voice lower than usual. "It's the work, sir," she replied, her own voice betraying a slight tremor. He held her gaze for a moment longer than necessary, a silent question hanging in the air between them. Alara, accustomed to guarding her emotions, felt a fragile wall within her begin to crack. There was something in his eyes, not judgment, but a curious, almost sympathetic understanding. It was a dangerous feeling, this recognition, for it hinted at a possibility she had long since buried. Later that week, as she was meticulously stitching the intricate embroidery onto one of his shirt cuffs, Elias Thorn found her alone in the shop, the other seamstresses having left for their midday meal. He held a small, leather-bound book in his hand, its pages dog-eared and worn. "You enjoy reading, Miss Vance?" he asked, his voice soft, almost tentative. Ilara looked up, startled. "I do, sir. When time allows." He nodded slowly. "I saw you with this yesterday," he said, gesturing to a small, unassuming volume of poetry she kept hidden beneath her work basket. "Dryden." "Indeed, sir," she replied, surprised by his observation. She usually kept her reading habits private, another small rebellion against the constraints of her life. He smiled then, a genuine, warm smile that transformed his features and softened the intensity in his eyes. "A fine choice. There's a particular passage in Absalom and Achitophel that always resonated with me." He paused, and then, to her utter astonishment, he began to recite, his voice rich and resonant. "Greater than, great wits are sure to madness near allied. Greater than and thin partitions do their bounds divide. Greater than." Ilara's breath hitched. Those lines, to her, were a painful echo of her past, a reminder of how quickly brilliance could be misconstrued, how easily passion could be condemned as madness. No one in Salem had ever understood that sentiment. No one had ever spoken of it to her with such quiet understanding. You know it well, sir," she managed, her voice barely a whisper. He closed the book, his gaze fixed on her. "Some verses, Miss Vance, find their way into the heart and stay there. They speak to truths that words often fail to convey." He took a step closer, and Ilara felt the air thicken between them. "And sometimes, those truths are shared, even by strangers." A knock on the door, sharp and insistent, broke the spell. It was Mrs. Albright, returning from her lunch, her bustling presence shattering the fragile intimacy that had bloomed in the quiet shop. Elias Thorne stepped back, the mask of polite reserve settling back onto his features, but the memory of his smile, and the shared understanding in his eyes, lingered in Ilara's mind like the scent of roses in winter. As the days turned into weeks, and the commissions for Elias Thorne grew more numerous and elaborate, Ilara found herself increasingly drawn to him. He was unlike any man she had ever known, intelligent, observant, and possessed of a quiet intensity that resonated with her own guarded spirit. She found herself anticipating his visits, listening for the distinctive sound of his carriage, her heart quickening at the sight of him. It was a dangerous path she was treading, a path she had sworn she would never walk again. Yet, the curiosity was undeniable, the emotional pull too strong to ignore. One crisp November afternoon, a new commission arrived, a grand ball gown for Elias Thorne's sister, Miss Ophelia Thorne, who was finally due to arrive in Salem. The design was intricate, demanding hours of painstaking work, and Ilara found herself alone late into the evening, the only light coming from her flickering candle. She was engrossed in delicate lacework when a shadow fell across her work. Elias Thorne stood in the doorway, a dark silhouette against the dying light. He carried a single, blood-red rose, its petals unfurling in defiant beauty. He didn't speak, simply held it out to her. Ilara's hand trembled as she reached for it. The rose was a vibrant splash of color in the muted shop, a symbol of something powerful and passionate. She looked up at him, her eyes wide with unspoken questions. "For your dedication, Miss Vance," he said, his voice a low murmur that seemed to fill the quiet room. "And perhaps, for your understanding." He turned to leave, but hesitated at the threshold. "There is something I must confess, Miss Vance," he began, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "The story of my sister's arrival, it is not entirely as it seems. There is more at play here than meets the eye, and perhaps a reason I have been drawn to your quiet strength." Before Ilara could respond, before she could even process the weight of his words, he was gone, leaving her alone with the fragrant rose and a heart pounding with a mixture of fear, intrigue, and a burgeoning, terrifying hope. The quiet life she had so carefully constructed was suddenly, irrevocably, shattered. The Scarlet Quill of Salem was about to write a new, dangerous chapter. The Tempest's whisper. The blood-red rose sat on Ilara's small bedside table, its velvety petals a startling splash of color against the austere white of her linen. It was a silent testament to Elias Thorne's unexpected gesture, and to the unsettling, yet undeniably exhilarating, shift in her carefully constructed world. His parting words, hinting at a hidden agenda and a mysterious connection, played on a loop in her mind. "The story of my sister's arrival, it is not entirely as it seems. There is more at play here than meets the eye, and perhaps a reason I have been drawn to your quiet strength." Quiet strength. The phrase resonated deep within her. For so long, she had viewed her resilience as a necessity, a shield against a harsh world. To have it recognized, and by someone as enigmatic as Elias Thorne, was both disarming and profoundly affecting. But the intrigue was laced with a familiar caution. Ilara knew intimately the danger of secrets, the corrosive power of hidden truths. Her own past was a testament to that. The next morning dawned with a crispness that belied the warmth in Ilara's heart. The air smelled of wood smoke and damp earth, a typical Salem autumn day. Mrs. Albright was already bustling about the shop when Ilara arrived, her face flushed with excitement. "Miss Ophelia Thorne arrives today," Mrs. Albright declared, her voice a little louder than usual. "Mr. Thorne sent word just this morning. She'll be here by midday, and he expects us to be ready for her fitting immediately." "Such an important commission, Ilara. We must ensure everything is perfect." Ilara nodded, feigning a composure she didn't feel. The arrival of Ophelia Thorne was the catalyst Elias had spoken of, the next piece in a puzzle Ilara wasn't sure she wanted to solve. Would Ophelia shed light on her brother's mysteries, or deepen them? The midday sun cast long shadows across the cobblestone street when a grand carriage, even more elaborate than Elias's, finally drew to a halt outside Mrs. Albright's shop. A small crowd had gathered, eager to glimpse the wealthy newcomers. From within, a gloved hand pushed open the door, and a young woman emerged, her presence immediately commanding attention. Miss Ophelia Thorne was a vision. She was taller than Alara had expected, with a graceful, almost ethereal bearing. Her hair, the color of spun moonlight, was elegantly styled beneath a fashionable bonnet, and her gown, though travel-worn, hinted at the latest Parisian fashions. But it was her eyes that truly captivated Alara, a vibrant, startling blue, intelligent and alert, taking in every detail of the bustling Salem street with an almost scientific precision. She carried herself with an undeniable elegance, yet there was a subtle tension in her shoulders, a fleeting shadow in her gaze that suggested a deeper complexity. Elias Thorne was there to greet her, a rare, tender smile gracing his lips as he helped her from the carriage. He placed a hand gently on her arm, a gesture of quiet affection that surprised Alara. He seemed softer, less guarded, in his sister's presence. As they entered the shop, Ophelia's blue eyes swept over the room, pausing briefly on Alara before settling on Mrs. Albright. "Good day, madam," she said, her voice clear and melodious, with the same refined accent as her brother, perhaps even more pronounced. "My brother speaks highly of your establishment." Mrs. Albright curtsied nervously. "Welcome to Salem, Miss Thorne. We are honored to have you." The fitting began almost immediately. Ophelia was meticulous about every seam and drape, but her criticisms were delivered with a polite, almost detached air. Alara found herself working closely with her, adjusting the intricate lines of the ball gown. As Alara knelt to pin a hem, Ophelia's gaze met hers. There was a flicker of something in those blue eyes, not unkindness, but a sharp, assessing quality, as if Ophelia were trying to read Alara's very soul. "You have a remarkable eye for detail, Miss Vance," Ophelia remarked, her voice smooth. "My brother mentioned your skill." Alara felt a blush creep up her neck. "Thank you, Miss Thorne. I strive for precision." Ophelia gave a faint, almost imperceptible smile. Precision is a rare and valuable quality, especially in a world where so much is imprecise. Her words hung in the air, hinting at a deeper meaning, a shared understanding with her brother that Alara couldn't quite grasp. As the days turned into weeks, the rhythm of life in Mrs. Albright's shop shifted to accommodate the Thornes. Ophelia became a frequent visitor, overseeing the creation of her expansive wardrobe. Alara, often working alone on the more intricate pieces, found herself in the quiet, sometimes strained, company of Elias Thorne. Their conversations were never explicit, always circling around the edges of something unspoken, like two ships passing in a fog, communicating through hushed signals. One blustery afternoon, a sudden rain shower lashed against the shop windows. Ophelia had left earlier, and it was just Alara and Elias, the rhythmic drumming of rain creating a cocoon of sound around them. Elias was examining a piece of Chinese silk, his brow furrowed in thought. "This fabric is magnificent," he mused, his fingers tracing the delicate pattern. "It has traveled a great distance." "Indeed, sir," Alara replied, her needle pausing. "Like many things that find their way to Salem." He looked up, his green eyes meeting hers. "And like many people, Miss Vance." Ilara's breath caught. It was a direct question, the closest he had come to acknowledging her own veiled past. She clutched the fabric she was working on, her knuckles white. "Perhaps, sir. Some journeys are longer than others." He stepped closer, his gaze unwavering. "And some journeys are taken to escape, are they not? To outrun shadows." The air in the room grew thick with unspoken words. Ilara felt a prickle of fear, a rising defensiveness. Had he been investigating her? Had he learned her secrets? "I am not sure I understand your meaning, Mr. Thorne." He shook his head, a faint, rueful smile playing on his lips. "Forgive me, Miss Vance. My words are perhaps too blunt. It is merely, I recognize a certain weariness in your eyes. A certain understanding of the world's harsher truths." He paused, then his voice dropped to a near whisper. "My sister, Ophelia, carries burdens of her own. Our presence here in Salem is not solely for the purposes of commerce and social engagement. There is a delicate matter we must address, a wrong that needs to be righted." Ilara's curiosity, carefully suppressed for years, surged to the forefront. "A wrong, sir?" He hesitated, his gaze drifting to the rain-streaked window. "A matter of family, of inheritance, and of a past injustice that has festered for too long. Salem, for all its charm, holds certain historical complexities. And some of those complexities have a way of echoing through generations." He looked back at her, his green eyes filled with a new, urgent intensity. "We seek not only justice, Miss Vance, but also a measure of truth that has been deliberately obscured. And I believe your quiet strength, your discerning eye, might prove invaluable to us."